Hello, and happy Amber Mid-Thunder weekend to those who observe it. She just had two movies come out on March 14th. We had Novocaine, which was so much fun. Not the strongest movie ever, but I also love Jack Quaid, and she just was fantastic in it. She also starred in the movie Opus, which is what we're talking about today. Opus? More like Nopus. Opus, more like that was a jocus. Ooh, it wasn't good. Hi there, I am the Antichrist. Happy Women's History Month. With one click of the button, you devote your soul to my cult. We are in the business of worshiping films like Jennifer's Body, films like Ginger Snaps, like Slumber Party Massacre. But I talk about all things horror, so if that sounds good to you, then definitely join us. Click the notification bell so you never miss the next video. Also click the like button because one like equals one cheers to Io Edebri and John Malkovich for trying their best to carry this film. I fear the burden was too heavy, for even their acting could not save us here. I'm gonna get into my spoiler-free thoughts on this movie first, so don't worry, you are safe for a while. I am not going to encourage you to see this film, but should you want to avoid spoilers, don't worry, I will give you a big warning before that happens. If you want to avoid even the synopsis of this movie like I did, then you might just want to click off now. But typically those people don't watch reviews for movies before they go and see them, so they're probably not here. What is Opus? Have you even heard of it? Since A24 is absolutely abysmal at marketing their films. Opus follows Ariel as she gets an invite to one of the biggest music events of the century. She has to go to the remote compound of this legendary pop star who mysteriously disappeared 30 years ago. Once she gets there, she realizes that said musician is surrounded by sycophants. Let's get through the positives. First of all, this movie is listed as a horror musical. It's not that. There are a couple scenes where the music is very front and center because it is about a musical artist. That does not a musical make. It's not a musical, so don't even worry. If you saw that and you're like, oh, I don't like musicals, I'm not gonna go see that, that's not even really a factor. The music is good. That's my first positive. If this was just a scheme to sell a John Malkovich album, I don't even care. I'm here for it. The music was good. I would like to add it to my Spotify playlists. Also, Io in horror? Hell yeah. I will always be welcoming any popular, talented up-and-comer to the horror genre. Io in horror scenes, in practice, I'm not sure about that yet. She has the ability to do a lot of facial acting. Love. In this era of like extreme filler and Botox, it unfortunately kind of limits the abilities of some of our favorite actors these days. Not her. Oh no, no. Her face was all twitching, moving about, being scared, but a little bit too much sometimes, to the point where you could see how intentional it was. You could see that it was very much acting, but nonetheless, a great first attempt at a more serious role for her. I know that she has it in her, so I'm not gonna complain too much. She did fine and was one of my favorite performances. Malkovich is also having a blast, giving what I perceive to be a very queer-coded theater performance. I hadn't seen him since Bird Box, and I actually loved the role for him in Opus. I saw some sentiments about him being miscast on Letterboxd. I actually completely disagree with that. I have loved him as a villain since I saw him in Johnny English as a child, and truthfully, I think besides Bird Box, that might be the only other movie I've seen him in. No, Warm Bodies! Oh my god, he's great in Warm Bodies too. Or I'm just biased because I love Warm Bodies. I haven't seen his more low-key stuff. I still have never seen Being John Malkovich, so I can't really speak to him as a performer very much. This is the most exciting performance of his that I have personally seen. Just because it's the most unique, it's the most out there. At some points, it felt like he wasn't fully committed to it, because they had him in some really weird, sort of modern, it was giving like EDM vibes, his costuming, only in certain scenes, but like at one point he had this helmet on and it was this kind of like gold foil, weird alien looking outfit, and he didn't seem too natural in outfits like that. Other funky outfits he totally did, so I don't know. While it was slightly inconsistent, I pretty much loved him in the role. The main problem with this movie really is that these actors, these great actors, were given pretty much nothing to do. John Malkovich had the most exciting role because he got to do like really weird theatrical stuff. Even that was pretty limited though. For the most part, he kind of just represented this mysterious leader who enjoyed pontificating on what life should be and the tenets for his what was very obviously a cult. We'll get to that in a minute, but just a couple other performances I want to talk about. Amber Mid-Thunder can do a lot with a little, but she only gets, I think, maybe 2 lines. She's sort of ever present, but she doesn't really get to speak. Jail! Illegal! She needs more lines, which she gets in Novocaine because she's kind of a co-lead, I would say. That is the March 14th release that I think you should be seeing this week. She plays a concierge of this compound and she is assigned to Ariel. I don't know if I've said that. Ariel is Ayo Edebree's character. She's kind of this wonderful little shadow and she's tasked with following this journalist around no matter what she does, no matter where she goes. She's never supposed to take her eyes off of her. And so the presence is felt, but she should have gotten more to do. Because really, I just will set my expectations a lot higher if you have an actress like Amber Midthunder, who, if you guys have been living under a rock and you somehow, or you don't remember, she was the lead of Prey, like one of the best movies of 2022, and that was a tall order, because great year for horror. So she felt a little bit wasted to me, and so did Juliette Lewis. I love Juliette Lewis. She's been a powerhouse since she came out the gate as a child. I was so excited to see her, but you can hold your excitement on that one. Truly, she's just there. This seemed like it was maybe a paycheck gig for her because there was nothing of note about her character. I don't know why they would want to pay a Juliette Lewis rate when they could have gotten any old person in that role. There were other characters as well that it's like, just why were they there? Maybe her character and those other periphery characters would have had more interest to me if they took even just 2 minutes to like develop each of them. You get some throwaway lines that explain who they are, and like in part of the reveal, it's once again just kind of throwaway stuff that it's like, oh, that's why this warm body was there for majority of the scenes. And there were some good horror movie elements, but they really banked on this one body horror moment, essentially carrying the entirety of the horror of this film. So they end up, I think, a little bit too excited about it, and they cut back to it way too many times, and for me, that just made it lose its bite. Some of the horror elements also genuinely just make no sense, which is a running theme of this movie. The writing doesn't make sense. Everyone has already pointed out the very obvious comparisons to be made. While I was watching, I personally was mainly just thinking of Midsommar, but as others have pointed out, it borrows from Get Out, The Menu, Don't Worry Darling, and apparently Blink Twice, which I haven't seen. I had to write them all down because it truly was an amalgamation of all of these previous horror films. Oh, and I also, while watching, did catch a whiff of Hereditary because there was a motif of beheadings. It felt like Mark Anthony Green definitely is a big Ari Aster fan, or who knows really who is, I don't want to say at fault, but it could be the influence of A24 as well. I've worked with a much smaller scale studio, and studios have a lot to say in what goes on in your movie. A24, I feel like, used to be sort of like Blumhouse, where they just found the most interesting new minds and just let them run amok. In the current era, I feel a little worried. This feels like either an overexcited director really keen on paying homage to his favorite stuff, or a studio being so beholden to their current brand that they get too involved and they interject too much stuff that feels like previous films. Because there were so many moments of creepy imagery in this movie, but so little of it was stuff that you could actually read into. Because so often, like for example, at one point there is a severed head that's inside of a wreath, and so in that moment I'm not really reading into it and what it means in the context of this movie specifically. I'm thinking, oh well, I've seen that before in Midsommar. Or as they're taking tours throughout the compound, the creepy imagery is just people doing art and smiling, kinda a la Get Out. Or the creepy imagery would just be like butcher tools and then a dead body. There was not an ounce of like an actual carefully crafted culture to this cult. When you compare it to something like Midsommar, where they had very purposefully fleshed out hundreds of years of history of this cult, specifically via mural, so there's so much you can read into with the production design. It actually tells the entire story of the film and the history of this group. In Opus, it would just be like, I'm sorry, mild spoiler, but I just don't recommend this film. It would just be like, oh, look, this guy shucks oysters because that's just something so weird that they do here. The cult thing also just was way too obvious way too early on, and that's why I feel comfortable talking about it during the spoiler-free section. It has the exact same structure as Midsommar, but it's just way too obvious. Midsommar keeps you really distracted with Dani's grief and also her relationship to Christian. With this movie, there is no such relation causing a distraction. Like, yes, Ariel is this really excited journalist. She's really excited to finally get her career going. She has a lot of self-interest, I guess, but they don't really spend much time building that up. You get one exposition dump that to kind of set up her character, and that's it. So it truly just is like her very directly facing all of this stuff. And it's like, why aren't we a little more scared a little earlier on? They essentially just put all their cards on the table immediately, which might not have been purposeful, but also because so many movies like this exist now, specifically within the A24 brand, we know what's going on. And it really doesn't help that the main character is a journalist with no real mystery to uncover because we as the audience are just light years ahead of her. There are really interesting themes introduced concerning the relationship between celebrity and the media, and they just like don't do anything with it. They kind of try to. I don't feel that it's doing anything to push the conversation forward at all, but we'll get into that more with spoilers. In fact, by the end of the movie, I felt more confused about the material than I did walking into it. That was kind of how muddy the messaging became. I think there's just a lot of great ideas just with no follow through because I felt like the focus was in the wrong place. So I'm down to give Mark Anthony Green another shot. I think that for a debut, this was serviceable. I'm inclined to take it a little bit more easy on him just because most people, their first feature, they're not gonna come out the gate with the Hereditary. They're not gonna come out with the Get Out. But mind you, Ari Aster had so much experience having professionally produced short films, and also Jordan Peele had a long history in comedy. Mark Anthony Green, I think he has 2 other credits on Letterboxd besides this first feature. I don't know how much he's been involved in the industry and more behind the scenes, but from what I can tell, like, he's a lot more brand new to directing. So I think for this first attempt, it's fine, serviceable. Not something that I would recommend you know, spend $18 on to go to the theater to see, but an admirable first attempt, both with him directing and also Ayo Edebiri entering the horror sphere. And if it was A24 getting involved with their branding and stuff, let's take a step back. This movie really felt like a parody of your whole shtick, A24. The only thing missing, I think, was a naked elderly person. You could probably fill out the rest of the bingo card though with A24isms. Overall, just a very meh experience. Unfortunately, quite a bit of a letdown for me. Because, I forgot to do the thing that I always try to do where I share with you the expectations I had walking into a movie. I should have done that. I always do that because it's important. Like, it adds context to your opinions of the movie. I love Ayo Edebiri. I loved Bottoms. I love anything that she participates in generally. I love the rest of the cast. Love Amber Midthunder. Love John Malkovich. Obsessed with Juliette Lewis. Ugh, that was such a disappointment. I also was unaware of who was directing. I was unaware that this was a first-time feature for Green. I barely even knew the synopsis. I knew that it involved an older musician and a young journalist, I think, but that was it. I didn't even know like the setup to the story. So I didn't walk in honestly with like a single expectation other than just a bit of excitement to see Edebiri starring in a horror film. And that was it. I really was a blank slate, so there you go. Forgot to mention that up top, but now we can get into spoilers. I kind of watched this movie, so you don't have to. We're gonna sort of just run through the plot. You are no longer safe if you would like to avoid real spoilers, so get out of here if you must. At the beginning, we set up this young, hopeful journalist, and they establish that she kind of runs things where she's at, but she hasn't really been offered what she's worth. She hasn't really been able to climb in her career at all yet. We also meet, I guess, one of her best friends who also is like in love with her. I don't know. We truly get one scene with this man where they're having a sushi dinner and he just gives a big exposition dump about how, oh, you're so closed off. You won't even let in someone that, you know, is kind of obsessed with you. And she's like, ugh, stop. So he has unrequited love. She's not into it. I don't know. Why do they set this up? Because quite literally, he never comes back. That scene also serves to establish that she is really trying to hit the next phase of her career. But that's it. And then I think at one point in a montage later on, like towards the end of the movie, I think we see this same guy working as a barista. That's it. We never talk to him again. We never see him again. But she and her boss, who I guess runs the magazine that she works for, they get invited to a listening party for Alfred Moretti at his Utah compound out in the middle of nowhere. It's the first time he's releasing music in 30 years, so it's like a huge deal. Her boss's name is Stan, and then also invited talk show host Clara, influencer Emily, paparazzi Bianca, and radio shock jock Bill. Once again, everything that's set up is just so throwaway and so obvious that it's just boring. The shock jock Bill, they established that he's someone that had a fight with Moretti back in the day, and that they were supposedly nemesis or something, and then he's the first to die. He's like getting a massage, and I don't know, they stab him in the back or something. It's just nothing is slick. Like literally the first meal that they have there that weekend, the appetizer is just a single loaf of bread that they pass back and forth down the table, and everyone takes turns taking a bite out of it. And like, that's some weird shit. Sharing DNA, who does that? A cult. I think it's meant to be kind of obvious right away, but then it's like, why show all your cards so early on? I don't know. I don't get it. Also because everyone is all wearing the same clothing. They call themselves the Levelists. So Ariel is naturally very suspicious, and she's the only one interested in actually investigating what's going on. Her boss, Stan, is just like clueless, and everyone else is just kind of swept up by the celebrity of it all. They don't really care. So is this movie telling us, hey, your journalism is not more important than your life? Wake up, get out. Oh, get out. I didn't even mean to make that pun. Maybe that's what they're trying to impress with the character of Ariel, but it's just, I don't know. For me, it just dipped way too far into the, like, this horror character is acting too dumb right now. As she spends a little bit more time on the compound, she gets to spend time with Moretti, she gets to ask more questions, she's trying to uncover the truth of this group. That's when she discovers the whole oyster thing. Look, the oyster thing felt so tame just because the horror elements of it were so in your face. You saw the scars on people's hands very early on in the movie, and because of those lingering, very tight close-ups, you're like, yes, I understand. You want me to see this movie. Like, I get it. They got scars on their hands. Why? I don't know yet. I'm sure I'm gonna find out. And then as soon as she's walking around with Moretti and he shows her the place where they shuck the oysters, there's a guy in there furiously at work. The moment they step in there, I'm like, oh, right, okay, of course. So we're about to see him stab his hand. It's just, everything was so obvious in this movie that you could call it at least 2 minutes ahead of time. I have a real problem with movies that think I'm dumb. Do you know what I mean? I forget if there was some more profound backstory to the pearls. I didn't really get anything out of it. Basically, this cult would shuck hundreds of oysters until they could finally find a pearl to then put onto a necklace that they would wear. Part of like their initiation or their commitment to the cult. I don't know. It was dumb. The character of Ariel even asks Moretti, she's like, so is there really any point to that? He doesn't answer, but it's moments like those that make this movie very much feel like a parody of common A24 films. Then she gets a makeover in which she has to get her private parts shaved by her stylist, and she does think it's weird. She does push back. She's ultimately convinced to do it, but like, this movie kind of wants to have its cake and eat it too with her character, where she allows that to happen. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt that maybe it's in the interest of journalism, in the interest of her story. But then very shortly after that, she's coming after all of her colleagues and saying like, something is very obviously wrong here. One of her colleagues gets shot through the chest with an arrow, and later on he's just drinking and like, oh, what's she so uptight for? Like, what? Shaving the pubic hair, also, it went nowhere. We'd never followed up with that to kind of uncover the grander meaning of, hey, why did they do that to their guests? My best guess is maybe it's some kind of like humiliation ritual or something. But let's compare it to Midsommar, right? Which, in my opinion, that and Wicker Man are like the ultimate cult horror films. They roll up and it's like, okay, these people take shrooms to celebrate Midsummer? That's kind of crazy, but okay, it's a really small amount. Sure, let's not be rude. Plus, they're college-aged people. Look, I was doing shrooms in college. I would have done it. Bottoms up, whatever. The slow drip of uncomfortability is what makes Midsommar work so well. Then in Opus, it's like right off the bat, okay, well, here is the designated person that's gonna spy on your every move. Also, we have stolen your phone and your laptop. Oh, and also, we are gonna craft exactly how you look, and it's time to shave your vagina. Then oddly, when they try to ratchet things up from that point, already so weird. You're not touching my genitals. Apologies, but I'm out. Immediately following that, there's another sort of listening party where everyone is there, and that's when John Malkovich is in that weird, like, EDM kind of vibe, helmet, gold suit. He's just dancing around and kind of dancing with these people. And that was a moment where I felt like these people, these actors were not entirely committed. It just didn't feel weird enough. And then that feeling was solidified by this next moment. The influencer just starts coughing. She's just coughing a little bit, and then Moretti is like, oh my god, take her to our medical station. She just sounds like she has a little tickle in her throat, but then everyone is like, oh, whoa. Maybe on paper that made sense, but I feel like they kind of underplayed it. So now the shock jock Bill, he's dead and gone. We can assume something equally horrible is gonna happen to the influencer. After this, Ariel sneaks out of her room to avoid her concierge, Amber Midthunder. Me personally, I would not be avoiding that woman, but That's just me. She finds a barn filled with dead animals and butcher tools, but she does not see the decapitated dead body just sitting there. I think I just was a little too fed up at this point to appreciate the dramatic irony. After this, she confronts Moretti and she demands that he let her leave, but everyone basically convinces her to stay for this puppet show that the children are putting on just while the bus is prepared and while the bus is coming up. She really didn't follow her instincts. She did indeed sit down for that puppet show. The puppet show depicts what looks like real dead rats that are playing like paparazzi characters and journalists and stuff, and they are harassing another celebrity rat. They're all sat down in this very uncinematic room and they're plopped down on beanbag chairs when suddenly the beanbag chair under Ariel starts to move and then something starts bursting out of it. And what should it be? The influencer. I don't, yeah. Her tongue and her lips and her eyeballs are really disgustingly swelled up because of some chemical she ingested. Then she is like suffocating to death. They like pop her eyeball and pus shoots out and other people are getting stabbed. And Ariel flees to some like museum dedicated to the cult and she finds cyanide and champagne. She finds that, you know, the head of the person in the wreath, like I said, suggesting that they're gonna drink the Kool-Aid. I guess they're gonna put the cyanide in the champagne, whatever. She's found there and then she's tied up and it's the most kind of anticlimactic, obvious culty ending where Moretti is standing up there and she's tied up and everybody's got their champagne and they're sipping on it. For some reason, one of the levelists ends up sympathizing with Ariel and she releases her, so she successfully runs away. And yeah, that's it. She runs away. It's pretty easy and that becomes clear later on why it was so easy. But even though it services the story, it makes that climax really boring and anticlimactic. Oh wait, before I get into the epilogue though, I did want to mention though that during that beanbag scene, that was the horror element I referred to that they overused. Her swollen puffy face was something they cut back to like 10 times maybe, so it just fully lost its flavor. Also, another thing about that scene, I was a little too weirded out to be scared by it. I saw some other people saying this movie sucked, but the beanbag scene was good. I was too preoccupied with the logistics. How did she not feel that she was sitting on a human body? I was confused also if it was supposed to be hyper realistic because the rest of the movie was very grounded, except when the guy got shot with an arrow and then was just goofing about later on. Like I said, that felt like a parody moment. So anyway, getting to the epilogue, she visits Moretti in jail after having the success of her book for kind of a follow-up interview. And it basically suggests that this was all Moretti's grand plan, so it makes sense why she got away from the compound so easily because he wanted her to write a book to spread his levelist ideology. He also reveals that they're alive, they did not drink any cyanide, they're out in society, essentially laying dormant, waiting to spread the word, waiting to rise up, you know? Thematically, I think it's meant to be the trickery of a celebrity weaponizing the journalism that so frequently tormented them. But I felt it was a little bit lost in the sauce because it was like also commenting on his ego. He did all of this because 30 years ago, journalists would lightly critique his music or kind of make fun of his bald head. And that's funny and that's camp, but it wasn't played off that way. So to me, it seemed like a serious take on what someone so influential can do when their ego is that weak. But it kind of took the bite out of what was already a non-existent gut punch because I'm like, really, his motives were that stupid? Celebrities forming cults is not new. You have Jared Leto and his weird little white island. Think wannabe musician Charles Manson and his ranch. There's a lot of interesting cultural stuff to dig up and explore. But this movie was like, what if a really insecure bald guy made that everyone else's problem? And could that be profound commentary in and of itself? Maybe. It just really simplified something that I think could have been fleshed out and so interesting. For example, my very quick pitch to fix this up a little bit, I think that the musician, the lead antagonist, should have been a woman, just because there are so many more layers there concerning paparazzi, body image critiquing. So many women are just subjected to these ruthless smear campaigns. We see one almost every single year, the most recent being Blake Lively with the Justin Baldoni situation. I also especially think of somebody like Millie Bobby Brown, whose appearance is constantly bullied. And it's like, yeah, she doesn't look the way she looked in the first couple seasons of Stranger Things. She's not a child anymore. But also she's only 21 and people are like, oh, she looks 40. Oh, she looks like a middle-aged mother of 3. Leave that girl alone. The tension just could have been ratcheted up quite a bit more if they played with the gender dynamics or even the racial dynamics. It felt like this movie took a very colorblind approach with its lead, even though you could tell it wanted to borrow from Get Out. My next fix is obviously obvious, I've already been over this, but make the cult into an actual religion. Flesh it out. Why did I watch the entire movie and not understand a single facet of their existence? I think that the closest we got was some dialogue from Moretti about, we just think that humans should just get to be, and I guess just to create art, I guess was their thing. They shuck pearls, which means they cut their hands a lot. Why? In Midsommar, it's just so painstaking the way that they display the culture, and that really, I think, was necessary for Opus. Because in order to understand the psychology of a cult, or to appreciate it in a movie as an audience member, you need to understand why the hell anybody would join it. Actually build the world that you want me to be terrified of. I also just remembered, right after I finished shooting, of course, another fix is that maybe I would have involved Amber Midthunder's character a little bit more. I would have developed her and had Ariel start to get more information out of her, so that we have an anchor, somebody to sympathize with who has joined this cult. We get a little more info out of her, and then maybe it could have been a really harsh twist where Ariel thinks that she's on her side, and then she ends up helping to capture her for the ritual at the end. It just would have added a little more texture, and also the added benefit of getting more from Amber Midthunder, just giving her more to do. Anyway, that's it from me. The only reason why I feel like I got pretty passionate in this review is because there is potential there. This could have been something really good. It didn't need to be so derivative. Thematically, it introduced so many interesting things that really could have set it apart from something like Midsommar, which I am constantly comparing it to. Even between Midsommar and Hereditary, which are both cult movies with huge beheading motifs, they are such different films. So it was possible for Opus. I don't think it's something that's been overdone. You might disagree, that's fine. I want to know all of your questions, comments, concerns in the comments below. That's gonna do it for me on Opus. I really wish that I could have loved this one, but Mark Anthony Green, I will be sat for what you do next. You have me intrigued. If you want to see more reviews like this, then like I said, click subscribe, join my cult. I also have a second channel where most recently I shared the story of my emergency appendectomy. Scary real life horror story for ya. But mostly over there, I talk about physical media. I'm a total physical media junkie. I also have some travel content and just random whatever I feel like over there. I have a Patreon as well, where depending on which tier you join, you get a bonus video every single week. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye.